It's been somewhat of a dry start to our early winter season. We haven't received rain since late October, but we're finally in for a treat. This next week, we're projected to get 3 to 5 inches, and that's just the medium-term forecast. We'll see what the next 2 weeks holds. So it's pretty exciting for us here in Napa, where the majority, if not all, of our precipitation happens in the wintertime. And because of that, it's very important for us to capitalize on the rainy season, to take advantage of it, to harness nature's natural watering system so that our soil will improve and our plants will benefit because of it. Sometimes in the rainy season, you want to cover things up to keep them dry. But on the contrary, there's other times when we want to uncover it to try and saturate the soil as much as possible. For example, behind me here, I have a block that had been cover cropped starting in late July, early August. It grew throughout the fall months, and we terminated it, cut it down at the surface of the soil, leaving the roots in the ground around late November, roughly 3 weeks ago. And because we haven't received much rain, I want to make sure the soil can absorb a lot of it in this next round of winter storms to encourage further breakdown of the cover crop here. Water and heat are very important when breaking down cover crop so that it increases the life in the soil, and also it boosts the fertility. Two main reasons why we want to cover crops our soil, specifically during the winter season. The rain will be harvesting it, store it in the soil here, put the tarp back on after the rain ends, and depending on how much we get, if the forecast is true, up to 5 inches, we'll keep the tarp on until springtime, until we're ready to begin building these beds again and planting into them. That will be enough precipitation. That will be enough water to store in the topsoil and to help the microbial life become active. Because this cover crop was cut down just a few weeks ago, that in conjunction with the time of year, the colder months, it has only begun to decompose. It's nowhere near ready for us to plant in these beds. But with the water, the rain that's forecasted for our area, plus the warmth that will be trapped under this black polyethylene tarp, will encourage the decomposition process to happen faster, fuller, so these beds are ready for our first spring plantings in March of next year. It's important to get a nice, moist, damp environment because that encourages decomposition. Water is the great equalizer in this whole entire process of regenerative farming. It activates life, it sustains life, and the more water we can capture through the natural processes of rain, the better, more fertile, well-established our beds will be. Cover crop also provides a unique characteristic in that the foliage that we cut down can create a surface mulch. And when we put a surface mulch on top of our beds, when it rains or when we irrigate, it creates a boundary on top that prevents evaporation happening. At least it slows it down compared to if we were to have no mulch at all. So by capitalizing on the rain and also establishing a mulch layer, we're able to build up our water reservoirs in our beds. They will stay damper longer, so we don't need to irrigate as soon in the springtime. And if we get our timing right, if the rains work in our favor, we can capture this rainwater, store it in the ground here on our beds, get our plants planted in the ideal planting window in spring, have them become established. And then their roots anchor themselves so deep in the ground in an area of the soil that doesn't often encounter evaporation at all, that we can begin to lean more heavily on dry farming methods. We don't need to rely on irrigation from our well, for example. We can strategically take advantage of the winter rains, capture it, put that water where it's most needed, and have our plants and soil benefit for the long haul. Mulching our ground and keeping our native soil covered might be the most important task to do before heavy rain events. On a topical level, the mulch creates a capillary-like boundary, so heavy rain events can easily penetrate the ground, and it acts as a yield event where it slows the water but also is able to absorb it more readily than if we were not to mulch our ground and we experience a lot of erosion and runoff. Things we don't want to see in order to capitalize on all this beautiful natural irrigation that's about to happen. And in this case, we're going to be putting wood chips in our pathways. The wood chips will benefit the farmer like yourself by keeping our boots clean and suppressing weeds during heavy rain events. It won't get so muddy in our pathways, but the water does a miraculous job in integrating this precious organic matter to where it's best used underneath the surface of the soil. It'll bring down these small little particles into the channels and the pathways that our soil has formed on its own if left undisturbed. And it will feed the mycelium networks, the microbiology, and the water is that great catalyst that makes it all happen. We don't need a lot of mulch, especially if we've been on top of it throughout the seasons. So in this case, between our winter hawk-rye turnips and our late fall lettuces, I'm only doing a light dusting. I want to make sure I'm applying enough so I don't see the previous mulching layer, but I don't need to really cake it on because a little bit can go a long way in this case. Also, let's take these lettuces here, which have been in the ground since late September. They've been progressing really well, and it would be a shame to have anything damage their quality this late in their progress, in their maturity. By mulching our ground, not only are we pulling the water down into the soil where it's best used, but we're preventing any water from splashing back up, dirtying the leaves. And in damp environments with dirty leaves, it can encourage disease and mildew and pest pressure to occur. And that's the last thing we want with these beautiful lettuces. They're at the end of their stage, of their cycle, and we want to make sure they pass that finish line just as beautiful as they have been throughout their entire growing process. Since there are so many things on the gardener and farmer's to-do list all year long, they become condensed closer to an event like rain where we want to take advantage of this natural opportunity. So I structure my to-do list, putting the most important tasks first, mulching our beds, covering our compost piles, uncovering our cover cropped areas that we want to irrigate. And if I have enough time, I'll move farther down on my list where I can complete tasks that aren't completely necessary. I'll be all right if I don't get to them, but it would be advantageous if I do complete them. For example, I'm raking up all these large live oak trees that our beautiful live oak here in the center of our farm tends to drop this time of year. And in doing so, I'm cleaning up the surface of our farm so that water can infiltrate our soil much easier than if I were to leave them on the surface of the soil. If I were to leave them on the surface of the soil, I'm creating an ideal habitat for slugs and snails to breed and hide out under during these rain events, and they'll come out and their populations will expand and ultimately attack our early spring crops, which I dearly want to avoid. So by taking the time to tidy up in this regard now, in the long term, we're setting ourselves up for success. Not to mention all these leaves make ideal leaf mold, which is where they'll be headed after I rake them up to our leaf mold station. There always seems to be tidying up to do on the small farm, just like our oak leaves here throughout the year. But right before rain is not necessarily a great time to tidy up our plants. If I were to tidy up these plants here, I would be tearing the leaves, for example, at the bottom of our plants, and I would essentially be creating an open wound here. And with a week's worth of rain ahead of us, it's going to create a very damp, moist environment, and this wound won't have a lot of time to heal, both on the leaf here, which is all right, but most importantly, on the plant itself. And if it's continually wet and that wound won't heal, it's inviting a lot of disease and mold and mildew and foliar diseases, even pest pressure to take place. There's a time and place for all tasks on the farm and in the garden. And it's best to save tidying up plants on drier days after rain events. One less thing to worry about before the rain sets in. Allow your plants to rest and drink and soak up all this beautiful rain that's coming from the sky. And there'll always be tidying up to do to benefit and establish this beautiful ecosystem that we live in another day.